Today we're going to talk about the difference between aerobic and anaerobic exercise, and then also talk about how we measure aerobic exercise. So first, let's go ahead and define the word aerobic exercise. The word aerobic actually means with oxygen. If you were to get up from your seat and jog around the gym or go out to the track and run, in order for your muscles to contract, it would require oxygen carried through the bloodstream. As long as this oxygen demand is met, then you are considered in aerobic exercise. Because the oxygen demand is met while you're exercising, these exercises are of long duration. Some typical examples would be running, biking, swimming. Of course, there are many others. Anaerobic exercise, whenever you put the word "an" in front of a word, it changes the meaning to the opposite. So anaerobic means without oxygen. During anaerobic exercise, the oxygen demand is not met, and therefore it is of short duration, a short burst of energy. Some examples would be lifting weights, sprinting. Because the intensity is so high, the oxygen demand is not met. So let's talk specifically about aerobic exercise. How do we measure aerobic exercise? Well, we first must look at what we call the principle of overload. And in the next lecture, we will talk more specifically about the principle of overload. But for now, what we will focus on is the equation, which is intensity times duration. Duration would be measured in minutes or seconds, laps, or miles. But how do we measure intensity when we're running? We first must look at what we call the target heart rate zone. This is a mathematical formula to figure out the zone that we should be in. The first thing you're going to do is figure out your maximum heart rate, which is 220 minus your age. Using an example of a 15-year-old, just for easy math, 220 minus 15 is 205. We do not work out at our maximum heart rate. Why do we not work out at our maximum heart rate? The answer is not that we will die or that we will even pass out. Long before that, we are probably going to slow down or stop. Because the oxygen demand is not met, that would be considered anaerobic exercise. So now we're going to find the zone. We're going to, first of all, take 70% of the maximum. So we're going to multiply that 205 times 0.70. For this 15-year-old, it would be 143.5, or rounded up to 144. That is the low end of the zone. Then we're going to figure out the high end of the zone, which is taking 90% of the maximum heart rate. So we're going to multiply times 0.90, and that will give us 185. And these are measured in beats per minute because it is your pulse or your heart rate. Therefore, your target heart rate zone for your age group is 144 beats per minute to 185 beats per minute. In order to maintain the overload, it's important that you balance the equation of intensity and duration. If you exercise at the lower end of the target zone, which is your intensity, then to balance that equation, you'll have to exercise longer. So for example, if your heart rate is 165 beats per minute, you might exercise for 30 minutes. On the other hand, if you exercise at the high end of the target zone, or high intensity, you'll be able to exercise for less time. If the heart rate is 185, you might exercise for 12 to 15 minutes. The main idea here is balancing the equation. If the intensity is low, you're going to have to maintain the overload by increasing the duration. So if you're walking, you might have to walk for 45 minutes to an hour to get an overload. On the other hand, if your intensity is high, then you might only need to exercise for a briefer amount of time to get the same overload.